Now, it's good to have you with us this Thursday, the 9th of June. These are your top stories. The fate of the Donbas is being decided in Severodonetsk. Those are the words of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as the battle for total control of the city rages on. The UN warns of a wave of hunger and destitution as war impacts food security, energy and finance. More than 1 billion people are likely to be affected. And 3 environmental groups are taking the British government to court over its net zero strategy. They argue it lacks detail.
The fate of the Donbas region is hanging in the balance in Severodonetsk. That's the message from Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. Even though the town is now largely under Russian control, fighting continues, making it the hottest spot on the front line, with Russia refusing to take their foot off the gas.
This is a very fierce battle, a very difficult one. Probably one of the most difficult during this war. I am grateful to everyone who is defending this direction. In many ways, the fate of our Donbas is being decided there.
Severodonetsk's twin town of Lysychansk is also a direct target for Russian artillery. Located north of Severodonetsk, control there gives either army domination of the whole area. But despite bombing and shelling, some locals are still refusing to leave.
In our country, you work your whole life to have a roof over your head. That's why we don't want to go somewhere where we won't have it, our own roof. There are a lot of people in our city who did not leave because they work for their own flat their whole life.
Elsewhere, there's also been renewed shelling in Ukraine's northern Kharkiv region. Russian military said they use high-precision missiles to hit an armor repair plant near the town.
The UN's chief Antonio Guterres has warned the impact of Russian invasion of Ukraine on food security, energy and finance is worsening, with 1.6 billion people likely to be affected. While this year's food crisis is about lack of access, next year's could be about lack of food.
3 months into the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we face a new reality. For those on the ground, every day brings new bloodshed and suffering. And for people around the world, the war, together with the other crises, is threatening to unleash an unprecedented wave of hunger and destitution, leaving social and economic chaos in its wake.
With an estimated 20 million tons of grain said to be stuck in warehouses on the quayside at Ukraine's Black Sea port of Odessa, Guterres is calling for a plan to transport it out. In Ankara, talks between Russia and Turkey to do just that ended without a solution. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Moscow was willing to open corridors to allow grain exports from Ukraine, but to do so, Ukraine had to remove mines from its ports. Kyiv, meanwhile, has dismissed what it called Russian empty assurances.
The High Court in London is hearing a case against the British government over its strategy to reduce carbon emissions to net zero by 2050. The claimants say that the Johnson administration's plan is irresponsible and unlawful, but not because of its objective, but because it doesn't show how the target will be met. The case, taken by campaign groups Friends of the Earth, Client Earth and the Good Law Project, opened yesterday and continues today. The government has already said its net zero plan, which involves more nuclear power, promoting walking and cycling, and investing in hydrogen and carbon capture schemes, has been endorsed by an independent climate change committee. But the groups behind the case say there's not enough detail about the quantity of emissions that each policy is expected to eliminate, and therefore it's impossible to measure the strategy's effectiveness and check that it's living up to the legal commitments contained in the Climate Change Act. The campaigners hope to force the government to adapt its net zero strategy to contain more detailed plans. The High Court will take several weeks to decide on the case. In the meantime, another case is being less formally made in the corridors of power, a few kilometres from here, by a right-wing faction of Conservative MPs sceptical about whether the net zero strategy is worthwhile at all. They want it to be scrapped. Ty Enright, Euronews, at the High Court in London.
Well, let's bring in Sahil Kher in London, a solicitor at the Good Law Project, one of the groups going up against the British government today. Thanks so much for coming on the program, Sahil. Friends of the Earth has called the UK's strategy flawed, inadequate and unlawful. Can you briefly, if you may, explain the arguments that are being made today?
So the starting point is, of course, that the UK government has committed to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. And the net zero strategy is the plan to get us there. Where we fundamentally disagree with the government is the level of detail that's required in that plan. We think to avoid a climate emergency, the law requires us to have a fully detailed, fully costed plan that will show exactly how we'll get from now to net zero. The government strategy so far really is pie-in-the-sky thinking that fails to fully set out the level of detail that we're going to require. And yesterday in court, they even admitted that the quantified plans that they've got so far won't actually deliver the emissions reductions that we need.
I understand there's also a human rights focus in today's hearing, put forward by the Good Law Project, challenging whether the government's obligations are in line with the human rights legislation. Can you explain to us what you're putting forward and what you mean by that?
Sure. We're looking to make an argument, and we started making those arguments in court yesterday, but we'll continue today, that to the extent that the government is unclear about its obligations under the Climate Change Act, they should interpret their obligations in light of Article 2 and 8 of the Human Rights Act, which requires you to protect the right to life. And we think the effects of the climate catastrophe are quite clear. And to the extent that the UK government is unsure about its obligations, they need to be cognizant of their responsibilities under the Human Rights Act to ensure that they protect the right to life. And which is why we say that an approach that leaves things to chance just isn't good enough, because we know if we don't hit these targets by 2050, the effects are catastrophic.
The UK's strategy was first published at COP26. This hearing comes as diplomats are currently in Bonn for climate talks. It's the first time they're meeting since Glasgow last year. Do you think they'll be paying attention?
Well, we certainly hope so. The UK here has the bare bones of something good in its net zero strategy, but the reality is it needs to do far, far more. And this is a great chance for the UK to be a real leader on the global stage in the fight against climate change. And we certainly hope that our legal action will help and ensure that the government takes further steps to ensure that the strategy is as good as it can be, to ensure that we're leaving nothing to chance in what is the defining fight of our generation. And we hope that this challenge is leading to some conversations in Bonn.
During a service at the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church in Berlin, the victims of the fatal drive on Wednesday morning were remembered. A 29-year-old German Armenian drove a car into a crowd of people. A teacher from Hesse was killed and 14 school children were hurt, some of them seriously. Berlin's Interior Affairs Minister said the evidence suggests the driver was a mentally ill person running amok. A second teacher was seriously hurt. Berlin's Mayor Franziska Giffey said she was deeply shocked by the incident.
We are shocked that an incident has occurred that brings back bad memories in all of us, including the Breitscheideplatz attack.
The Breitscheideplatz was an incident that became known as the Christmas market attack. Police say the driver of Wednesday's disaster was arrested at the scene. Berlin's top security official also added that posters were found in his car, which he expressed views about Turkey.
Don't go anywhere. Coming up, meet the Estonian writer who has opened a world-first reserve for introverts so people can enjoy their own company in peace.